Shout out to our 10 subscriber Dawson. This is the deck tech and full deck list for Jellicent video that we use in Arceus and got us all the way there. 70% win rate. Enjoy. We have 10 subs, so as promised, deck list. This is my actual deck that I used in a local game tournament. More on that later. So here we go, build right away. So to start, we have 1 Budew, we have 4 Frillish, 4 Jellicents, 1 Lillie Clefairy, 1 Relicanth, 1 Fezandipiti, 1 Counter Catcher. I believe it would be 3 Crushing Hammers. Yes, 3 Crushing Hammers, 1 Earthen Vessel, 2 Enhanced Crushing Hammers, 2 Grabbers, 3 Nest Balls, 2 Night Stretchers, 3 Pokégears, 1 Switch, 1 Team Rocket Watchtower, preferably reverse, 3 Arvens, 2 Boss's Orders, 4 Hildas, 4 Ionos, 2 Xerosic, 1 Air Balloon, 1 Deluxe Bomb, 2 TM Machine Devolutions, 4 Ignition Energies, and 6 Psychic Energies only. And that's the full build there. So, now let's get into the explanation as to why the deck ended up like this, right? And the deck tech with it. So the goal of the deck is actually giving them one single turn, preferably where they can use items. And that one single turn will be if they went first, they get that turn to use items. If you went first, they get their first turn to use items, and after that, the deck basically locks them out of the game from items, either by the Budew or Frillish. And after that, evolving into Jellicent, and they can't use items or tools. That's the basic game plan of the deck, so everything in the deck is based around that. There are many builds that use acceleration, like with Guardi or Crispin and that sort of stuff, to try and accelerate energies, as well as the build with Monkey Dory and that sort of stuff. The reason I'm not running those is because it gives too many options for your opponent to use boss's orders to just boss out your Jellicent, and then they out of item lock and they'll have a big explosive turn. So, from experience, that usually doesn't end well. That's why we have the Relicanth. So let me go back a bit so I can put it up on screen so you can read it properly. Right, that's why we have Relicanth. So you can see here, memory drive, each of your evolved Pokemon can use attacks from their previous evolutions. So that means our Jellicent can actually use this attack here, Oceanic Gloom. Don't worry about the damage output isn't as bad as it looks. It's actually quite excellent. That means that when you do that attack, even if they boss out Jellicent, they still are locked out of items. And remember, you're not swapping out your Jellicent. So meaning they have to burn a boss's orders in order to even use a tool. And Impatience usually gets the best of them, so they waste the boss's orders and still can't use items on the turn. Also, thing to note, in the deck, everything outside of Jellicent and Frillish has 1 or less as their retreat cost. So you see Fez, Relicanth, Lillie Clefairy, 1 retreat, and no retreat with the Budew. That's also my design, because that means you don't have to actually worry too much about retreating and losing energy. That's why we have the 1 Air Balloon. In the event that we have to retreat him, we also have 1 Switch. So that's pretty good. And saying that, I just realized I didn't say switch when I was going through deck, but you can see it here. The other thing to note and add is that's the aggressive part of the strategy. Next, because of the current format, we actually have enhanced hammers, because right now there are a lot of Dragapults. I repeat that because that didn't sound clear. There are a lot of Dragapults and a lot of decks running Luminous as well as Prism Energy. The new upper is fairly popular as well. This guarantees you get rid of that, and that's enough to slow them down. And remember, they're not getting items, so you don't get access to item recovery. So no rare candy, no stretchers, no super rods, none of that. So any resources they lose, they can't get it back. We are running 3 nest balls because Body Puffins can't actually search for the basic Pokemon in this deck outside of Budew. So that's a prime target to get other Pokemon on the field. The 2 Night Stretchers are in case you need to bring back any of the Pokemon energy, but the count is usually more than enough. Because 1 energy for this, and we'll use 1 energy on this, as well as the Ignition Energy to get off the 4 energy cost for the damage to be maximized. So they said once you have 4 energy, the Ignition counts as 3, so 1 Psychic Ignition does the 160. 160 is enough to get rid of most Pokemon with 2 hits. And that's where we get into the first bit of deck tech. We have Lillie's Clefairy. Lillie's Clefairy gives all dragons weakness to Psychic, meaning against Raging Bolt and against Dragapult, you can one-shot them with a Psychic Energy and an Ignition. Also, this attack also will knock out a Dragapult, so that's an easy 2 prizes. So that's a way around those sort of matchups. As you go further in the build, you'll see we have Team Rocket's Watchtower. This is our way around Ursaluna, Noctowls, and many other non-Pokemon in the format that you don't really want evolving and that sort of thing. That's including Pidgeot as well. So this is key piece. Also, it is some stadium defense against things like Neutralization Zone, so they can get that out of there. As we go further along in the build, we'll see we have Pokégear. The Pokégear is also very crucial as it allows us to find the particular supporter that we need. And speaking of supporters, we only have 5 supporters in the deck. So, firstly we have Xerosic. Xerosic is the supporter that we have the least copies of, running at 2, because Xerosic is used as they have a build-up of items and tools in their hand and cards they can't use. So, the other issue of explosive turns is solved by Xerosic, because after locking them among items, the items will build up, so they might end up with a hand of around 10, sometimes 15 cards. Xerosic forces them to discard down to 3, and means they're going to lose all those items and recovery, so that even if you end up in a situation where they are able to use items, they don't have the items to use. We have 2 copies for redundancy, and to make sure that we at least go into it. The deck also pulls it to runs down itself. When you pull cards out of the deck, so it goes down quickly enough, so it's very easy to find the supporters you want, again with the Pokégear. Next, we have Iono. Iono is an excellent pick in this deck. Because you are locking off items 100% of the time, when you Iono, it doesn't matter if they get extra cards in their hand, because they can't use items. So if they draw into items, it's much more tough. It also allows us to see more cards in the deck, and when they add things to their hand, we can make sure they go to the bottom. So pretty good. You may get ahead most of the times, but in those games where you don't get ahead, very crucial. Next, we have the Hilda. Again, 4 copies, because we always want to get Hilda. Hilda is our way we find our Jellicent, and is the way we find our Ignition Energies. So you get that proper setup. If you go first, that second turn you Hilda, you go up, lock off, and you get the Ignition right away to hit for the 160. You can also just find a random psychic energy when you need it. If you just need to do 80 damage with the attack normally with the Jellicent to knock out any of the small basics like Dracloak, Charmander, anything under 80. Then we're only running 2 bosses orders because we have a counter catcher. The counter catcher is searchable by our final supporter, which is Arven. The boss is in situations where you want to draw the game out, or they can deck themselves out as well, which is pretty easy, because decks that are very, very quick, but no, and they lose access to items on recovery, tend to burn through the cards quickly, and if you can't win by the knockouts, you can surely win by them not being able to recover energy. So against decks like Dragapult and Charizard, because they run through cards so much and pull their energies out so fast, after the hammers, they very often run out of steam, and with the inability to get back that energy, so you know they're out of energy. Any deck you face against, you can pull something up and just lock their items and tools with the Jellicent, and there's no way out for them. There's actually no way they could win. They have to run through, and even if they use their bosses orders, that's why we have the strategy of the Relicanth and the Jellicent. So they have to boss out in the hope of using items if you can't swap back into it. But if you do, they have no chance. Also, many decks don't play more than 2 bosses orders in lieu of many counter catchers. And counter catchers is an item, so this is not going to be very useful against you. And finally, Arven. Arven is the most versatile card in this deck, as it can bring any number of the items that you need, as well as the tools. So let's get into the tools now. This is where it's maybe a bit controversial, but again, tested, because this deck is the result of around 300 games and many iterations. And I played from everything across the board. So we have 2 TM machine devolutions. We're running 2 because it's not just a tool to get knockouts, it's also a tool to keep your opponent's decks on the back foot and stop them from those explosive turns. So even if they get a rare candy by some manner of luck or play, the devolution would actually send them back to their basic form, and the devolution forces them to now go up manually, so they have to evolve up to stage 1, then to stage 2, meaning you are guaranteed 3 turns against Dragapult and Charizard as long as you lock off tools and items, so their deck is much slower and they have to choreograph it. Meaning, once you see they evolve up a Dracloak or a Charmeleon on the bench, you have your boss, you can actually kill it, and that stops that, so they have to start over. Or you can actually just de-evolution that turn, it'll unevolve all their stage 2s back to the stage 1s with rare candy, or it puts them back a turn where they have to evolve up again, so they can't go into their Typhlosion, they can't go into their Charizard, they can't go into their Dragapult, or any other stage 2 that you could think of. I mentioned Typhlosion because against Typhlosion, this is amazing, because they often evolve a lot of Quillavas on the bench, so when you use the de-evolution and they go back into Cyndaquils, they have to now evolve again into Quilava and then into Typhlosion, which gives you time to actually set up enough energy so that you have more Pokemon in the backup. Next, we have Deluxe Bomb. So this is my A-spec of choice because it supplements damage and it's very, very good at giving you that extra prize when you're short and helping you cross that threshold of damage when you can't get it. So against decks like Joltik Box and I want to say Golden Go, this is very good. Because no matter what basic you put it on, and your key targets for it are Frillish, Budew, and the Jellicent. You will rarely put it on anything else. On Budew is almost the ideal target on opening because its low hit points means that it will get knocked out and it will take a return knockout on whatever killed it once it's a basic. And in a game against Iron Hands, what happens is Iron Hands will kill it, take 2 prizes, that's fine, but then you can go into your Jellicent with the 4 energy because of ignition, and you hit 160, so that goes all the way up to 290. Because remember, 10 damage from the Budew, then you have 160 plus 120, that's 280. So even if they put a big charm on it, it will still get knocked out, because Iron Hands is 238 points. The same goes for most EXs, and because of the energy loss, they can't recover it again. No items, no tools. That also means TM Evolution, the green one to the Evolution, also isn't very useful. And that's what makes the deck so lethal. It's the card selection and the ability of the deck to hold items off for basically the whole game. Unless you use the big attack with the Jellicent instead of the item lock, it's a very, very niche situation where they'll get access to items with this deck. Because going up into Arceus now, I usually do 10 game checks, so I'll see how much wins and losses in 10 games. This deck is sitting at a comfortable 70% win rate in Arceus. Very, very comfortably. I tested in person at our recent cup, and again, the only matches I lost, one I opened just with a Frillish, and I didn't have anything to bring another Pokemon, so I got dunked by Raging Bolt. We've all been there. And another game, I opened with just Budew, no supporter fuse or anything else, and I was Budew alone for 4 to 5 of my own turns, and they still couldn't get out of it because of the item lock so bad. They forced their own Iono, and Iono got me into Frillish, and then it started rolling, and the game still came down to them being locked up, and they can't do anything. But they were running jet energies because they were playing a Yan Mega deck, so they didn't need items as much, but still it held them back for the entire game where they were going to deck out. But it ended up coming down to time, so I was trying to make a play for the win, and they found their last jet energy and used it to get their Pokemon out and take the knockout. So the main weaknesses of this deck are, just as I mentioned, that we are only running 4 and 2, 6 and 7, 8 basic Pokemon. It's still not a small amount, but there's a tiny chance you'll open with one of the non-item lock Pokemon in the form of Relicanth, Fez, or Clefairy, but that's very unlikely. Less than 50% to get that alone, and even if you do, you have 3, 6, 9 cards in your deck that free you from that position. And remember, you have 6 prizes, you draw 8 cards. That is way more than quarter of the deck to not open with a Pokemon that able to item lock, or something that can get you a Nest Ball or a Nest Ball itself. So it's very unlikely that you will be stuck with a single Pokemon. It happens maybe 1 in around 15 to 20 games where you don't have an item lock Pokemon. And again, it's Pokemon, look at the draw. No matter what deck you go with, even if it's Open, you might start a game with just Hoot alone. You can't avoid it in Pokemon. Even in, well, this is Dragapult Charizard, my build. You can still just open with a simple Drippy, and we call it a brick locally, but you just have nothing else. You have nothing to play, nothing to do. You get a Drippy, 4 a candy, 2 of the Super Rod, a Switch, and some Stadiums. You can't do anything. Again, luck at the draw. But once you know the deck functions. So if you hear this long and you actually want to know the in-depth run of the deck and how the deck runs, this is exactly how the deck runs and why these particular cards in the deck, because this is the 5th iteration of the deck after around 200 games. So the last card is, I had a debate on if to put Fez in the deck to keep it as close to locking them off with items perfectly as possible, but the Fez actually worked out very well and very important, because many people get item locked and then try to get prizes off from up under here and target the Fez or target the Jellicent, which doesn't really bug you that much, Because if they actually kill the things around the Jellicent and you end up with 2 Jellicents on the field, it means they cannot get out of the item lock. So all of that stuff is basically a big red herring. And if they do get rid of them, you have the Night Stretchers in case. Because you have enough copies of these that you have enough redundancy as the final part of this deck. Since you're running 4 copies, if they kill 3, they get their 6 prize and they win the game. So you have 1 extra copy that could die. And you could use the same math to explain what exactly they have to knock out to get their 6 prizes. It has to be this have to knock out. You'll have to knock this out as well for 4 prizes remaining. Then 2 Jellicents or Jellicent and a Clefairy or this. Or working with a combination like that. And again, that isn't the most easy thing to do because you just going to keep the items off, and as long as you can keep their energy low, and the item lock is usually enough to slow down all of the meta decks, Grabber is the godsend against those evolution decks. Because once you can see their hand, this actually takes a Pokemon from their hand and it puts it at the bottom. So against decks like Charizard and Dragapult, because they can't rare candy, you can actually snatch their Charizard or even their Charmeleon or Dracloak, whatever you want, out of their hand, stopping them from evolving up and holding them off long enough for you to actually take all the knockouts you need. And that's basically deck tech. You can try it, see what you like, but I would say there aren't much variations to it when it comes to pure Jellicent. This is another one here. This one runs 3 bosses and a practice studio, which was a different iteration where I am running this for the extra 10 damage because I think that I wanted 10 damage against, that would be a meta that's heavy in Typhlosion, because Typhlosion has 178 points, this does 160 damage, so you'll be 10 short most of the time. And 3 bosses because you want to just get target selection. And that's the only iteration other than this that I run. There was one previously where I actually was trying to get rid of Pharmacy version 2 here, where I was using these to test, but the evolving up and leaving holes for them to just get through with items. So we're not doing that. And that's when I reached this far after 300 games. I think I talked long enough. I'll have some more gameplay footage as I use this deck to see how high I can climb in the ladder before Mega Evolutions releases. And finally, this deck will also be very valid with Mega Evolutions coming out, because all the decks moving forward are very heavy on items. So test it out, let me know how it looks, how it plays, and yeah, have fun. Bye. And thanks for tuning in. Fuck me, fuck this game. Bye.